If you're beginning to get to know me through these videos, you will know that I adore religious art. I am not religious, I am not Catholic, I am not Protestant, but my goodness, do I adore the art. And a few years ago, a friend of mine decided as a mature student to do an art degree, which was fantastic. And as part of her art degree, she had art history lessons. And she came to me to borrow some books. And she was railing and ranting. Why do I have to study religious art? Why do I have to study religious art? Now, I've been brought up with religious art all my life because my father was a passionate enthusiast about art and history of art, and particularly Tuscany and the Renaissance, and I studied at a university. Never had it occurred to me that people would have a problem with religious art. To me, that's what it was about. And of course that's what it was about because that was the point of art. And now I have my daughter doing a PhD on how patriarchies has affected the built environment. And you can't get a much greater patriarchy than the ones who put the Bible together. And she is angry about religious art. So this is my video about what you would miss if you took religious art out of the equation. Now, what has to be remembered are two things. One is the reason art was being painted and sculpted was, yes, to the glory of God, but also to provide a visual story for the mainly illiterate populace that was going to church. So most people, except the very educated, the very wealthy, would not be able to read at all. So they needed to see pictures of Bible stories to have the stories reflected back to them in a way they could understand beyond listening to them in Latin. The other thing to remember is that artists were not allowed to paint what they wanted. Well, it wasn't they weren't allowed to paint what they wanted. They were like jobbing plumbers, electricians, stonemasons. They weren't, very rarefied people. They needed money, they needed jobs, so they were going to go where the commissions were, and the commissions were mainly from the church and the wealthy families. And even the wealthy families, portraits aside, wanted great religious scenes in their homes, particularly in Italy. So this is why it is religious art. But if I just wanted to get it out there that if you have a problem with religious art, you may be missing out on, well, you will be missing out on some of the greatest art that's ever been created. So a bit like my last two videos with the Renaissance and the Baroque, I'm going to give you an amuse bouche, a visual amuse bouche of what you might be missing if you say no to religious art. So we started with the Renaissance. There are three areas of the Renaissance: the proto or Trecento, the early and main body, the Quattrocento, and the high Renaissance, the apex. Now this is Italy. This is Italy. It is the amazing, amazing Giotto, and this is the beginning. And it's the emotion. You think it's classical values and it's all emotionless, but it isn't. And this is Giotto. This is 1305. A very rich patron decided to build this building and have it decorated by Giotto. There are fresco cycles all about the life of Christ, the life of the Virgin, and this is all to do with a moneylender wanting to buy himself into heaven. So it gets very basic. And then we have the early Renaissance, and we have one of the most beautiful men of all time, Fra Angelico. He was a brother in a monastery, and he decorated the monastery with frescoes. I'm doing a video on this because he was absolutely beautiful, and this is quite early. We haven't even got through to the mid Quattrocento yet, but so beautiful. And then, of course, we have to have my favourite, Piero della Francesca's Resurrection. And Botticelli, we know Birth of Venus incredibly well. She's the poster girl for the Renaissance, and she's, you know, everything that the rebirth of classical values needed to be. But he also painted these absolute exquisite Madonnas. Look at that face, look at her beautiful, beautiful veil, so sheer, and that amazing halo in sort of fretted gold, and the loving way that Christ stares up at his mother. So again, Botticelli, you know the Birth of Venus, but do you know his Madonnas? Because they're all absolutely exquisite. And then, whether you believe in Christ or not, this is one of the greatest paintings of his dead body there is. Just absolutely extraordinary. That foreshortening and that visceral realism of the wounds. So this is Mantegna. But of course, it's not just paintings, it's also sculpture and it's also architecture. And to me, the greatest sculptor, figurative sculptor of all time is Donatello. And he is a Quattrocento Renaissance artist. And I'm going to see, in June, I'm going to see his exhibition at the V&A, and I am so excited. It's so unusual to have his work over here. I wanted to show you this Madonna and Child. Again, this beauty, this tenderness. He was very famous for very, very dramatic 3D sculptures, but also these very gentle reliefs. So not only would you be missing out on paintings, frescoes, but also sculpture. And this is what I mean about Donatello. This is one of the most extraordinary sculptures I've ever seen. And this is Mary Magdalene, out of the wilderness. Look at her face, look at the ravages. And you cannot tell where her hair stops and her ragged clothes begin. And this is in the Opera del Duomo. If you're going to Florence, the Opera del Duomo is where all the works that built the Duomo are. So it's opposite the cathedral, so worth a visit. But this is Donatello. This is, he is just the most amazing figurative sculptor of all time. And here's the Duomo. So the building itself is not Renaissance, but the dome is. It was a massive problem and Brunelleschi solved it. Would you want to go to Florence without the dome? No, you would not. So this is not to be missed, none of it. And then we get to the High Renaissance and the real greats, and where everything blooms to its ultimate perfection. And of course, another incredibly famous painting, The Last Supper by Leonardo, gradually disappearing, because rather like me, he was a bit inventive with what he chose to paint with. But, you know, again, everyone knows this. So this is High Renaissance. This is not to be missed. And another Madonna and Child by Raphael. Raphael, this great courtier. Rather like a continuation of Botticelli, but the summation of the Renaissance, with his exquisitely beautiful Madonnas and amazing, amazing landscapes in which they are sitting. And of course, the Sistine Chapel ceiling. You know, that's High Renaissance on steroids. The High Renaissance sculpture, of course, the Pietà by Michelangelo in St. Peter's in Rome. And here we have Mary just saying, look what you've done. Here's my dead son, but also giving him to the world to save our sins. It's one of the most beautiful and not easy to do. There are a lot of Pietàs, and you know, you've got a woman holding her grown dead son on her lap. Not easy to do, but he does it beautifully. And probably the most famous of all statues is also Michelangelo and his David. And this is High Renaissance at its best. And again, very, very large and impressive. And then there's the Northern Renaissance, and it travels over the Alps. And this is what you'd be missing with the Northern Renaissance. And this is a Massacre of the Innocents, quite a popular subject. And it's when Herod decided to kill all boys aged 2 and under, because he wanted to kill Christ and couldn't find him, so he thought he'd just kill every boy just to be safe. And this is a very northern scene, as you can see. It's also very political, but we haven't got time to go into that now. People of a certain age, mine probably, this was on a lot of student walls, posters of Bouche's earthly delights, mainly the left panel, right facing us, which is all the tortures that the sinners receive in hell, and they're all musical tortures. So there are people strung up on harps and all sorts of horrible things going on. But again, this is a religious piece, and it was bought by the most religious man in the world at the time, Philip II of Spain, and that's why it's in the Prado. So you think this is all heathen, but it's not. And then I want to show you the Baroque you would miss if you were cutting out religious art. And as I explained in my video about the Baroque, it's all about the fight back against Protestantism by the Catholic Church. And we have the Crucifixion of St. Peter by Caravaggio. St. Peter being crucified upside down because he didn't want to sort of impinge on Christ's majesty in any way. But look at the Baroque lighting, the theatrical lighting. And this is also by Caravaggio. It's in the Louvre. It's very big. And I will definitely be doing a video on this because it's one of my most favourite paintings. And this is the death of the Virgin Mary. And you don't often get paintings of this. She doesn't really count much once Christ has died. She disappears from the Bible. And you can see that amazing Baroque curtain in the background and all the people surrounding her. And we have no idea who they are. That's a whole other discussion. Wait for the video. And of course, Artemisia Gentileschi. We get women coming through. There were a few nuns in the Renaissance, but now we get women painters coming through, and she was a follower of Caravaggio. Caravaggio didn't want any followers, but he got them. And she is an Italian follower. And as I said before, you've got to remind yourselves that the Baroque is very bloody. So don't be put off like that. They're just illustrating stories. It's an incredible piece. So this is the Baroque in all its drama. This is a Rembrandt in all its fantastic theatrical lighting. Again, vast settings, but very intimate scenes going on. Of course, there is sculpture, and really the greatest and probably the only sculptor you need to know about in the Baroque, and that is Bernini, and he was just phenomenal. And his Baroque sculptures are just so full of movement, and every angle you look at, you see something different. But again, it's David and Goliath, so it's religious. And in terms of architecture, this again is Bernini. I mean, he was a master, and he created this amazing colonnade in front of St. Peter's. St. Peter's just had a sort of rather scrappy square in front of it in Rome, and he created this amazing set of arms that would hold all the faithful. And if you go to Rome, nobody is ever not going to go and visit St. Peter's and walk through this incredible piazza with its colonnades. It's just astonishing. So this is what you would be missing some of what you would be missing if you cut religion out of your art experience. So it's my entreaty to you that you don't, and I will be showing a lot more in order to persuade you.